All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to be talking to you today. It is Thursday, the 21st of November. So glad to have Andy Ellis with us from the Green Party in Maryland. Hey, Andy, how you doing?
I'm great, Hal. How are you doing?
I'm really well, and I'm so appreciative that you're coming on the program. This is your second time, I think, on Halitics, and I really appreciate what you bring. And I also appreciate the fact that you're taking on both parties, both of the major parties, if you want to call them. I just want to thank you for that.
I'm happy to do it, and I appreciate your support. And anybody else who I know there's a lot of people out there who want something different, and I'm happy to put my energy into providing that option.
I think there are a lot. I think that's exactly correct what you said. A lot of us are really looking for an alternative to what we have. But honestly, and let's just start right here, I was very disappointed. I voted for Jill Stein, but it seems like the total number who did. And why did we're having a little tech issue here, folks. Andy is with us. I'll get him right back for you. But Andy, just, why do you think the numbers for her weren't what we were hoping for, maybe? And maybe they were, and I'm wrong about that. But there was definitely a lower turnout, I think, than maybe many expected, given the situation we have in this country right now.
So I think, can you hear me?
I sure can, Andy, and I apologize again not having. Gosh, I mentioned this before. I don't know what's going on with our tech here, but go ahead. I'm going to just put myself on for the second. We'll get you on in a minute. Go ahead. What do you think was causing the issue there for the lower turnout than maybe we expected for the Green Party in the latest election?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that there's two things that play here. And one is that the Democrats in the Harris campaign and their affiliated organizations and all of those things spent a tremendous amount of time, energy, and resources attacking the Green Party from September through October. And that type of stuff works. There's a reason they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on those ad campaigns. There's a reason they roll all of their surrogates out and things like that, because those type of attacks work to depress people's support for Jill Stein. That's what they were intended to do. All those, rolling out AOC, rolling out some of these other folks, in order to directly call out and attack the Green Party, was meant to get people to not vote for the Green Party. I think their hope was that somehow the second choice of those folks would be to vote for Harris. And I think we can see from the results that didn't happen. But I don't think we should underestimate how powerful a mass marketing campaign led by the millions of dollars that one of the two parties have directed at a third party can be. We don't have the kind of resources to fight back. Jill and Butch were out there trying to do the work on podcasts and on social media and things like that, but that doesn't counter a television ad during the Ravens game or during an NFL game. That has power. There's a reason they raise billions of dollars to do those types of things. They work. The second thing I would say is the Green Party has this sort of fantasy goal of 5% in a presidential election. And it is an important goal, but nobody knows how to get there. The Libertarians don't know how to get there. The Greens don't know how to get there. And any candidate that we've seen that has been an independent in the last 20, 40 years get above that 5% threshold has either already been a very wealthy person or has been a very prominent politician. And we simply don't have the roadmap to 5%. We don't know what we have to spend on billboards, ads, social media. We don't know how many people we have to have on the ground. We don't know any of that stuff. We just don't know what the day-to-day logistics of a campaign that gets to 5% is. So we were sort of riding on good vibes and energy, and the Harris campaign was able to attack that. And maybe the only numbers they moved during the entire election at the end of this were depressing Jill and Butch's votes with their campaigns. I don't think they moved their numbers. I don't think they decreased Trump's votes, but I think they did a good job at the sort of asymmetric warfare of attacking Greens when there's no way the Greens can respond.
Well, I thought, Andy, and again, we keep losing you here. Every time I try to get a slide up, we lose you, and I'm very much at a loss, and I want to get those slides in if at all possible. If we have to do the program without them, we will. I just want to real quick, though, as I always do, Andy, and you know this feature, the the victims of American imperialism. And there you have the 87 killed in Gaza yesterday. The death toll so high, over 44,000. I think this is the worst thing, pretty much the worst thing I'm aware of the U.S. doing in my lifetime, and it horrifies me. I would have thought that the full, unwavering support that the Democratic nominee has continued to say she had for Israel would have helped the Greens, and it did help you in Dearborn, Michigan, it seems. But that's about the only place. The turnout, even in Michigan, I looked at the numbers, was down from 8 years ago with Hillary Clinton. I was hoping that the focus by people like AOC on the Green Party might actually help you, might bring some attention. Apparently, that was not the case.
I mean, it depends. I don't think it helped in the numbers on election day, but I do think that it helped to galvanize and crystallize for some people the path forward. So I think that there's a core of folks that are going to come out of this who were thinking that maybe the Democratic Party could be reformed, or that the Democratic Party could be changed from inside with people like the Squad. And I think there's a lot of folks who have now seen that that is not the case. So I do think we come out of this with a core group of people who are very clear in their analysis that the two parties cannot offer us a solution, because both of them are hand in glove in supporting genocide. And I think supporting genocide absolutely hurt Harris this campaign. I just don't think it helped anybody else. And in part because I think they cast Jill Stein as no different than the rest of the politicians. She's just a grifter. She's just in it for herself. And I think for folks who've never seen her or never heard from her or don't follow green politics between elections, that message was persuasive. And instead of voting for Jill Stein, a lot of those people's second choice was to stay home. And maybe some of them voted for Trump, but I don't think they went and voted for Claudia or something like that. They just were like, even the person we had hope in, she's just like the rest of the politicians, And so I think Jill, being on her third run, being a sort of known commodity in a sense like that, suffered from the attacks the Harris campaign launched against her when it came to the numbers.
All right, you're watching Halitics. We've got Andy Ellis with us. He is a Baltimore City Green Party activist, advocate for working class people who are in marginal communities, and for everyone, for peace, for the environment. I mean, I could just go on, but, good things that will make America a better place. Andy with us. I'm going to just keep it between us because I've thrown out the technology out the window. I'll figure it out later. There's no point in wasting the time. But if folks want to join us, I think we can take calls. I hope we can. 240-242-5646. You might as well give that a try. Andy, how much do you think the kerfluffle or the confusion over Cornel West's run as a Green Party potential nominee cost the party?
I think Cornel West flirting with the party and then leaving cost a lot. I think Cornel West has the kind of celebrity and the kind of name recognition that can make the difference in something like this. He already had the ability to get on CNN and go talk to Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo and Roland Martin and all those folks prior to him deciding to run as a Green. And I think I think he would have done better. I mean, I think he would have done better with a party behind him if he had been the kind of candidate that people had hoped he was. I'm not actually sure if he was the candidate he ended up being, if it would have done much better, because I don't think that, for as much as he talks about an unwavering critique of imperialism and capitalism, I think he wavered at points. And I think that wavering caused a lot of the folks who would vote outside the two-party system in an election like this one to ignore him, And I think at the end of the day, he could have been a good Green Party candidate if he had had the courage to challenge the system that Jill has. But I don't think he showed that. at the end of it. And look, I have a ton of respect for Dr. West. There's like 6 books over here of his on the bookshelf. I've been following him since the mid-90s. I really respect him tremendously, and I think he's done good work, and I think his politics are important, and I think his voice is important. But I don't think the campaign that he ran this time was the fully understood the role that third parties play in a two-party system. And I think he imagined a more liberal system in which him saying these prophetic things was going to cause a change as opposed to a confrontation with power. And I'm not positive that he was ready for that. You know?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack. I was really excited when he decided to run as a Green. When he announced it, I thought this is somebody who really can attract people based on the name, based on his record. And when he left to go to his independent thing, it was I was disappointed just because I really want us to build an alternative, and I'm doing what I can to do that. And, I just didn't see it as a positive at all. In fact, it was worse than if he had just simply stayed out of the race altogether, for sure. There were a lot of issues there. I don't know how far we have to get into it, but I agree. That was a missed opportunity. No question. No question about it. Andy's running for governor. You've announced it in Maryland in 2026. We may flit around a little bit. GoGreen2026.com is the website, so please check that out. I think this is a really tall order you put to yourself, Andy. I mean, this is a very popular governor. He's often touted as a potential presidential timber is Wes Moore. And of course, the Democrats always looking for a centrist and looking for appeal, charisma, not policy to base their nominees on. But that's still, in this state, Maryland, the most Democratic state. Why take it on, and why do you think, or what do you think your chances are in terms of potential vote gathering?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I think Wes Moore is queued up to be the next president, at least a contender for the presidency next time. I think, in fact, Wes Moore's positioning for presidency works better in a world where Harris didn't win this time. So I think it's even more acute, those possibilities. And I think we know what happens when neoliberal Democrats run for president. They move to the right. They abandon their black, brown, and white working class base, and they run on things that we saw Harris run on. And I think if Wes Moore does that, I think it opens up space in a place like Maryland, which is incredibly blue, but there's a lot of differentiation amongst that blue. I think it opens up space for a new set of politics that is focused on making sure that working people have what they need and that corporations pay their fair share. And I think that is sorely missing from our politics right now. And look, I think the Green Party provides some benefit and some challenge in this regard. The benefit is that we have ballot lines, and no other left party has ballot lines in the state right now. So we should use those ballot lines in order to advance this agenda, which says things like, increase the wage of workers and tax the wealthy. Make sure that we're ready for the climate crisis, make sure that we're repairing the damage that we've done from climate already, and making sure that we're reconstructing our society so that working people can survive in a world of climate change. Make sure that we divest from a war economy and invest in a peace economy and in a solidarity economy. And I think there's space for those messages, and I think there's space to deliver those messages. And I think there's a lot of Democrats who agree with some of those things, but feel like they don't get a chance to voice them because our governors always have presidential aspirations. And I don't know what it is about being governor of Maryland that makes people think that maybe it's Spiro Agnew's fault or something. But I don't know what it is that makes people think that being governor of Maryland qualifies them to be president. But we've seen time and time again, it does do that.
Well, you're right. I mean, I'm thinking Martin O'Malley, just interrupt for a second, and Larry Hogan, obviously the Republican, had certainly floated that possibility as well. So there does appear to be at least the aspiration, if you become mayor, you become the governor here, that you'll run for president. So there is that. But I think there's, if you look at Westmore, he punches a lot of kind of identity boxes, right? He's attractive, he's young, he does speak well. I think he served in the military. He's African American, but he's, in terms of his appearance, he's certainly non-threatening. I think there's a lot there that Democratic operatives, the consulting class, would look at and say, we can mold him into a president, and he will probably do what we want. He made a lot of money on Wall Street, I believe. So he's just what they want, sort of a centrist, neo-lib, as you said.
And I think he is who he is, and I think he has a lot of really strong qualities, and I think he has a lot of things that make people excited about him and appeal about him. But I also think that he continually moves to the right on policy. And, I think a great example of this last year is the Fair Share Act, which would have increased taxes on the wealthy, closed corporate tax loopholes, and given tax breaks to working people. And instead of siding with the 40 Democrats in the House who supported this and the 40 labor organizations and progressive organizations that supported this, he went to the right on taxes and said no new tax increases, even though we have a huge revenue shortfall. And he increased registration fees. He increased other fees across the board. And those are direct, those are user fees, are taxes on the working class that he chose to deploy instead of siding with the people in his party who were making sensible arguments for why we need to increase taxes on the wealthy people who make up the Maryland. So I think there's space for these conversations. I think there's space at the top of the ticket to create a path forward that is different from what the Dems offer and what the Republicans offer in this state that will be attractive to people. I don't know how many votes we're going to get. We got to get 1% in order to make sure that we don't have to go out there and collect petitions again after that. So the job to be done, in my regard, is to get that 1%. But obviously, I want to get more votes than that. I'd like to see us be able to be the best performing third-party ticket in Maryland in the last 25 years. I'd like to see us at 3%, 5%, 8%, whatever. I think those numbers would show that Maryland is really ready to have a new party. But it's not just the governor's race that is important. I want us to run people down ballot on this sort of platform that is about peace, justice, democracy, and ecology. And so in places like Howard County, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Baltimore County, where they have public financing, I want us to run candidates in this people-based platform that really pose challenges, that collect public dollars for campaign finance, and that really shift the discussion away from the sort of neoliberal focus that the Democrats have put on it in the state for years. I guess I look at it this way. This is a state where the Democrats have every statewide office. They have veto-proof majorities in both houses. They have veto-proof majorities in both houses of the General Assembly, and they have the executive and most of the county council in the top 8 population counties. And they govern like they are afraid of Larry Hogan and the Republicans who have no power. And
well, is it that they're afraid of those people, or is it that they are just responding to their financiers, their backers, the money people? I mean, I don't know that it's fear exactly. It's that, hey, we get a lot of corporate contributions or contributions from corporatists and, multimillionaires, billionaires to some degree, Zionists, and we're not going to take on the financial elite, regardless of how harmful the policies they espouse are.
I think it's both. I think it's fear. I think it's fear that financial elite will vote for Larry Hogan or somebody like Larry Hogan if they take them on, right? So I think they fear that group of suburban, mostly Democrats that have money and resources would switch to a Republican if they stood up and said, we're actually going to tax the wealthy at a rate necessary to live up to the revenue obligations we have.
I mean, I think there's truth to that fear. I mean, we saw what happened to, say, Jamal Bowman in New York State when he made some relatively mild criticisms of Israel, hardly close to what Israel, what we should be saying about Israel, and yet he was torpedoed completely by AIPAC. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not like I'm defending Bowman exactly, but the problem is that at least in a state like Maryland, which in some ways mirrors, I think, Westchester County, where Bowman was from, high income, relatively diverse, with a pretty sizable Jewish population, I would think, and a lot of African Americans whose votes I think aren't always as popular. They're not necessarily populist Democrats or populist progressive economically. I think that, is a big issue, and I don't know how to deal with that. I don't like to pigeonhole people either or put them in categories, but I think this is not necessarily a fertile state for Green Party politics.
I think it is and it isn't. I think the fact that Democrats have such a hammerlock on all of the positions of power makes it a little bit easier to develop the alternative, because they have less of an ability to talk about they have less of an ability to scapegoat Republicans as an imminent threat. So I think that part of it, the absolute control that Democrats have over every lever of power in most parts of the state, makes it a little bit easier to have some runway that typically Greens don't have on a national level. And I also think that there's an electorate that has caused it to be that way and is going to be hard to move. But I think that if we can start giving people a positive vision of a Green Party that they're excited to support and excited to help build, I think it meets a need for, working class and pro-environment, pro-justice politics that isn't being met by the Democrats in the state right now. And it meets a need that a lot of people want for an alternative. We don't even really have a two-party state here. We have one healthy party, the Democrats, and then one sort of kind of healthy in a couple of counties party in the Republicans. And so I think there's a lot of folks across the state who want an alternative, who want something they can believe in, and who just want to see it working in a way that makes them feel interested in it, And so I think there's opportunity. I think there's limits and possibilities of this kind of organizing in Maryland.
All right, Andy, again, Andy Ellis with us. You can see his website right there, gogreen2026.com. And if you want to join us, 240-242-5646. No slides today, just Andy and me having a little bit of a tech issue in case anyone's wondering about that. But you definitely can still subscribe to Halitics. There's no tech problem there. So just go ahead and click subscribe if you haven't yet done so. I'm glad you mentioned the local races, because governor is, the top executive. It's not president, but it's one step down in terms of executive positions. And one thing we saw on my Facebook page is a number of commenters questioning the reality of Green Party politics with only what they see. They only see a candidate every 4 years. Jill Stein, it was Howie Hawkins in 2020 who did even worse, 0.2% of the vote. I think Stein got 6.6% this time around. And they're saying, hey, you're not doing anything for us. To me, it's a real chicken and an egg, though, because until people rally behind Green Party candidates, until they support them or run, you aren't going to hear from them. So it is important to try to find people to run for office. But if you lose, we had a candidate here in Montgomery County. I interviewed Nancy Walls, a really nice person, really good person. I like her policies. I think we had to run against the warmonger here, Jamie Raskin, the phony, progressive, as I call him. But, nobody's going to beat Raskin, and she got as far as I know, no media attention.
Yep. I think those races can be challenging sometimes, especially when you're going against somebody who is going to win by 70% of the vote, right? Because there's not really a story there from a newspaper's perspective. There's not really that much of a story there. This is a foregone conclusion. And yes, she is mobilizing support against him. And I thought she did a really good job of articulating green policies and solutions and things like that. But there's no power at risk. There is no power at threat, and so I think while those races are important to run in order to get our ideas out there and to give people more choices, I don't really think they change outcomes. And so, like, a race that I'm really interested in is like the Allegheny County Board of Commissioners. And you're like, why the Allegheny County Board of Commissioners? Well, privatization in Allegheny County of things like water bills has allowed some parts of the county to see huge increases in their water bills over the last 5 or 6 years. And the Democrats in Annapolis aren't doing anything about it. And the county council isn't doing anything about it. So, like, we have a guy out there who we're thinking about trying to get to run, who's been active on this issue for a long time out there. And if he can run for the next 2 years talking about how water bill deregulation has screwed the regular person in Allegheny County, sooner or later he's going to get some attention. Sooner or later he's going to cause some leverage to happen. And he might just get the people who are in power now to do what he wants because they don't want to deal with him showing up at every one of their events anymore. And I think we got to start thinking about how to use the power of our ballot lines in order to change outcomes that materially benefit people's lives. And so, like, there's a part of me that says those people are right. Like, I think that the people who say we only see you every 4 years are oftentimes coming from a bad place, or coming from a disingenuous place sometimes, especially the ones who are operating within the Democratic Party's talking points and framework. But I also think there's truth to that. Like, I think there's a degree to which people don't see Greens on the ground in their community addressing the day-to-day material needs they have that affect them and their family.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. But again, it's a real chicken and an egg, because how do you grab people to join the Green Party if it's hardly even a presence? And I'll get into that in just a moment, a little more in terms of other institutional support that you might, and I believe should have and don't. Do want to give a quick shout out to Emogi in the chat. Emogi enjoying our conversation, says he loves to hear about local politics and local races. Yeah, let's talk about that. And let me give you one other issue first before I get into the institutional left, because I was thinking about this and then I lost the thread for a second. Corruption is such a big issue around the state. I'm here in Montgomery County. It's a one-party county completely. And there's no question that there are a lot of sweetheart deals, sweetheart contracts, construction going on in the Board of Education. They have over $1 billion budget. I don't know how big. It's enormous. And a lot of the facilities are very outdated. Salaries are bloated. They have, again, a lot of work is outsourced. Is there a way that you can bring this matter? I know you mentioned it is the same thing with the privatizing water. That do you feel like this is an issue that can really maybe move the needle?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. I think that there's a lot of legalized corruption in a state like this that comes in the form of patronage, comes in the form of contracts and things like that. And frankly, to me, a lot of that is way worse than the things that we will see every now and then about a working class politician that took some money or something like that. Like, screw those folks who are taking the position of authority and putting themselves in that position. And at the same time, like, you'll see these like federal prosecutors going after these politicians that do like kind of small dollar corruption, when the big dollar corruption is a form and nature of government in this state. And I think it happens in the red counties where they control them entirely. And I think it happens in the blue counties where they control them entirely. And I think without a left challenge to this type of thing, you end up seeing things like Musk and Ramaswamy being able to talk about how they're going to solve these problems with the federal government, and they get a receptive audience because they're the only one addressing it and they're the only one who is offering a solution. And I think on so many of these things, if we want to hold off the forces of fascism, we need to be able to address these issues that a lot of people care about from a left perspective that is rooted in people, that is rooted in community, and that is rooted in the material needs of working folks.
Yeah, I see the problems that we face right now as truly existential in nature, and existential not like, well, a meteorite's going to hit the Earth in 10 million years, but existential in the sense that in our lifetime, maybe not mine, but my children's, my grandchildren's, things are really going to collapse. They are collapsing now. They're going to really hit probably a majority of people on the planet, if not more, in very noticeable, tangible ways. And you can see moral-wise what's happening in Gaza. I think the world, the U.S. is ignoring it, is we don't see a lot of it in our newspapers, but at some point, even Americans are going to have to realize how we participated in the eradication of a people, or at least a very significant number of them from the earth. And in terms of the ecological collapse as well, obviously, my only hope, really, Andy, and I said this, is maybe a Green Party that can take on the corporate elite, corporatocracy, but again, seems like such a daunting task. Do you agree with my analysis, or do you think a little too pessimistic?
I don't think there's a liberal solution out of the path that the two parties have put us on. I think there's very illiberal solutions that are coming down the path for us. I think democracy as we know it is really at threat. I think the world we live in climate-wise is really at threat. And I think we're going to start seeing the impact of supporting genocide and war around the planet come home like we have in the past, but I think we'll see it again. And I don't think there's a solution. I don't think there's a path out of this in which the Democrats and the Republicans right the ship and get away from MAGA-ism and back to some time where there's compromise and all of that stuff. I don't think that path exists without, without significant conflict. I mean, maybe there's a liberal path on the other side of some authoritarian or civil war or something like that, but absent that, I don't see it. And I think the only hope we have is to build out a multi-party system in which the left has a hard anchor and has developed the power and the organizing capability to take on the forces of corporatism that are mixed with the government. And it may not be the Green Party. Right? It may not be 10 years from now, if this thing emerges, it may not be that the Green Party is the third option or is the left option. But right now, in Maryland, we're the one who has the ballot lines, we have the platform, and we have the history to be able to get out there and do it. So I think it is daunting, and I think the dauntingness of it is what makes me wake up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. every morning, ready to take it on, and put in that 4 hours before I start my day job.
It's amazing because you were full-time. I think Nancy, maybe she's retired. I don't think so. It's amazing that you guys can do that. I, again, doff my cap to you, and whatever support I can offer, I will. Thank you again. Andy, there's just so much to go to. We have Andy just till 1, hard stop at 1. We'll try to let him go a minute or two before that for his work. So we thank you for joining in. Let's get to that issue of the institution. So I actually want. All right, one more thing before we get to it, because I want to get, you and I agree on an awful lot. One area where I think we've disagreed in the past and probably still do is, and I'm going to call it identity politics, wokeism, whatever you want to call it. I believe it's very, I believe electorally and actually policy-wise, the focus should be on colorblind, race-blind, nationality-blind solutions. I think that's how you reach the most people, and I think that's how we address the problems that racism and other xenophobia have created. In this last election, the Democratic Party did lean not the candidate herself, but the party we've seen in the past has on occasion focused on identity politics. Certainly Hillary did against Bernie, right? She said, well, Bernie's going after the big banks, but that's not going to stop racism, as though those are somehow an argument against breaking up big banks is that, well, it's not going to end all racism. I mean, it's a stupid response by her. But when at least some seemingly liberal or Democratic affiliated groups do lean into what many Americans think is not, what shouldn't be a focus, trans girls competing against biological girls in high school athletics, something like that. It does seem to have negatively impacted on this electoral success of the Democrats. I don't think it cost them the election, but it was a problem for them to a degree. How does that impact on your thinking?
So look, I think my understanding of this is that in the original basis of identity politics, identity was a thing that was made up by race, by class, by immigration status, by sexual orientation, and by the other factors that shape the material conditions of people. And I think that a world in which we see a world in which we see those interconnectedness between those identity characteristics is a world in which we can make material changes that benefit a lot of people. I think the Clintons have been particularly good at stripping that materiality out of identity politics and repackaging it back as a sort of a representational politics, in which they're not saying, how do we get birthing centers in Black communities where maternal mortality rates are very high? And instead they're saying, isn't it great to see somebody who looks like me on the stage at the DNC, right? And so, like, if the question, for me, the question for trans folks is not which sports they can play in. I understand that there's a debate about that, and I understand that the Republicans have done a good job of using that debate in order to frame the entirety of the discussion. The question for me is, how do our trans friends and neighbors make sure that they have health care? How do they make sure they have jobs? How do they make sure they have safety in their community? How do they make sure that their interactions with law enforcement are not based on bias? How do they make sure that their housing they're not being discriminated against on housing issues? And I think if we're talking about that and focusing the conversation about trans rights and those material rights, it's an entirely different conversation. And I think the Democrats are afraid to do that because they think using those words will oftentimes get them painted in a certain way. And so now what we see is there's sort of glee of them to throw folks under the bus without addressing those material needs because they lost the culture war that they waded into. And so it's like, I'm not saying that the sports question and the bathroom question are not real questions. I am saying that the real questions of jobs, housing, safety, education, healthcare, for the people in the trans community are really important. And if we don't have a focus that acknowledges that, we're not going to get that. And we're also not going to get any progress on any of the other things that are being brought up. And I think that happens across a lot of people's identity categories as we focus on this sort of representational politics, as opposed to understanding that the root of identity is an intersection of these things. So a poor Black woman is poor, Black, and a woman, and trying to separate those things out into things that check 21st century identity politics boxes is bad for everyone. So
let me just jump in real quick, and then we're going to get to the institutional. So I have no issues with what you're saying, but let me frame it a slightly different way and get your response to this. What I believe is the only path perhaps to electoral success, to supplant the Democratic Party, is a focus on human rights as opposed to trans or any other rights. So 100% what you're saying, the trans community, one of their biggest problems that they're facing is homelessness. I understand trans youth especially are at very high risk of homelessness. So if we say one human right is a home, is a safe, secure place for you to sleep every night, and every single American gets that. If we are elected, we are going to do everything we possibly can to make sure everyone has a home. You will address the issue that trans folks are especially trans youth, are disproportionately homeless. But at the same time, other people who are facing homelessness, including white men, will also get that same right. And I think the other issue that I would focus on, and we could do across the board, healthcare, everything else, but to say not only that, everyone has a right to these things. No one has a right to be a billionaire. No one has a right to have so much that they can corrupt the system, they can pervert the system. And then we would address what, some say, well, there's white men have disproportionate wealth and power, which is true. I mean, I say Jews, I'm Jewish, we have disproportionate wealth and power, but you can't go after Jewish people. But what you can say is, hey, there are some groups that have managed to aggregate and collect far more than they should have, the individuals among in that group, and we're going to make sure, no, you can have a little more because you worked really hard, you came up with a great idea. So yeah, maybe you get to eat at a nicer restaurant than some other people do, but you're not going to get to have 5 homes and 20 cars, etc. So your thoughts on that?
So let me take the first part about this. I absolutely believe that housing should be a right for every person. But I think that to understand how to get housing to be a right for trans youth, we have to understand the unique conditions that they're facing as a result of their identity, right? And so there's a set of pressures that trans youth face that contribute to their homelessness. And if we want to make sure that our extension of a universal right also includes them, we have to understand those specific pressures and the specific ways that works, And so I would not say, and I think this is the thing that Democrats often do, which is to say, this group is going to get something and the rest of people are not going to get something. And I think that approach to it is bad. But I do think it is important to understand that different groups of people have different reasons that contribute to their homelessness or the housing insecurity. And that we should not be afraid to recognize that the reason that trans youth are housing insecure is similar but different from the way that Afghanistan war veterans might be housing insecure. And we need to understand for both of them the things that are uniquely contributing to their situation. Remember all the factors that make up their identity. How do those factors, how does a universal housing plan solve for those folks so that those folks don't fall through the gaps, is how I would say it should go. And so, I'm not saying, I would say absolutely yes to universal housing, and we have to have the appreciation of each person and each identity's experience that contributes to their lack of housing. Now, on the question of like wealth accumulation, I mean, this is a place where I do really think that, like, yes, we should have a higher tax on wealth. We should close corporate loopholes. We should encourage cooperative businesses. And I think we should do those things across the board. If there are a particular area, say, in Western Maryland, there is a lack of small business resources for returning Afghanistan veterans or something, then I don't think it's a problem to tailor programs that help those people to get into business ownership or things like that. But I don't think that we should not tax somebody because of their race or their ethnicity or something like that. If you got $1 billion, you should pay the taxes on it,
Well, I think, yeah, that would seem to be a tough argument to exempt some people based on their identity from being taxed. Go ahead.
I guess what I just want to say here is I think the Democrats, I want to go back to this point, that I think the Democrats have done a really good job of separating the materiality out of their identity politics. And they treat you the same whether you're a black billionaire or whether you're a poor black person living in a city that is over-policed. And I think that framing of it is part of the reason that they have lost the light on this in national elections, because they are doing the thing that people think they are, which is signaling out what they consider a special interest group and giving them resources that they're not giving to other people. And I think we need an approach that has universals in it, but also like understands the different components that prevent people within those communities and from attaining that universal good.
Really appreciate that answer. Thank you for that, Andy. Let us move on then to what I have really did want to focus on too, is the failure of what I call the institutional left, these institutions that many of them created in the 2016, or in the wake of Bernie Sanders' loss to Hillary Clinton, one I worked for several years as a staffer, Our Revolution. There's others, PDA, Progressive Democrats of America, DSA, a little bit older. We saw them rally behind Kamala Harris, even if some of them didn't, officially endorse her. They rally, they door knocked for her. I saw DSA people doing this. PDA endorsed her, even though their charter, they have some rule that says we only endorse Democrats who support Medicare for all, which she most certainly did not, although she at one point said she did. So to me, this was a massive failure, and it also was another lost opportunity, because these institutions collectively can move some people. And if they had together embraced the one pro-peace, pro-ecology, pro-healthcare candidate, Jill Stein and Dr. Butch Ware. I don't want to leave him out of this. He was a real fireball. I really liked him a lot. I was very impressed. I think I'm hoping he stays involved. But had they embraced that one pro good things ticket, I think that we might have seen a little bit higher percentage for the party.
Yeah. So, and I make a distinction. I would put DSA in a slightly different category than I would like Our Revolution and some of those folks. And only because I think DSA, even if it's national leadership, is invested in the Democratic Party, I'm not sure the rank and file is invested in the Democratic Party as some of the other organizations. Some of the other organizations are just really mobilization organizations, though. They're not actually organizing entities. They are well-funded nonprofits that are there to mobilize people to vote, volunteer, and donate to Democrats. And those institutions, I don't know what role they have. I think those resistance organizations like Our Revolution that came out of 2016, and again, I know plenty of good people in Our Revolution, but I don't understand what that organization is at this point.
Well, I think it's really declined. I mean, when I joined it, there really was a sense, I thought, that we were not there to support the Democratic Party, but to support progressives. Our state group endorsed Franca Muller, Muller-Paz, did I say that right? Franca Muller-Paz, who was a Baltimore Green. So disappointing. I was going to bring up that race because that was a relatively well-funded Green who was up against a relatively unpopular Democrat, and I don't think she got a third of the vote, or maybe just a third.
She got 35% of the vote, which is the best result for anybody other than a Democrat in a Baltimore City election in probably 50 years. And that unpopular incumbent lost this time around. That unpopular incumbent passed a bill that allowed the cannabis money to be used for reparations in the city. And then he lost in the primary this time. And he lost in the primary for a lot of the reasons that Franca brought up and Franca galvanized around. Franca did not win that race at 35%, but she set a tone that ended up leading to that candidate being gone. And we need to think about the way that we can contribute to outcomes. We can use our ballot lines to change outcomes in ways that materially benefit people. And sometimes that doesn't mean winning and holding power. Sometimes that means showing the electorate how bad somebody is and that somebody with a different set of views could be better. And so, I thought the DSA support, the AFL-CIO support, the Our Revolution support for Franca was all really important. And what I think we lacked as a party in that was the ability to contextualize that 35% as progress or as a win. And so those organizations that did buy in on her were like, well, what did we get out of this? Now we have less favor at City Hall.
Well, a big deal. You're exactly right about that. And also, there's just not a lot of money, even at 35%. She had to struggle. She did fundraise well, but that's where the money stays. And these organizations are invested in making sure that their relatively high salaried top managers are getting their salaries. And the way you get that is you're out there hustling for Democratic candidates. Even the donors, even the small dollar donors to these organizations tend to be to the right of the rank and file. So people who give $25 a month to Our Revolution they're going to be a little wealthier. They're going to be a little more comfortable with the status quo, and they're going to be a little bit more uncomfortable with calls to say, totally dismantle the current healthcare system. And that is why one of the reasons I think we see that, and just the leadership that's not on the side of the people.
I think these nonprofit advocacy organizations that have a membership base as an afterthought but don't arise out of a membership, I think that it is really easy for them to become mobilization organizations that are focused on voting, volunteering, and donating. And they're not actually building power in order to leverage it, right? They may leverage it in a primary, but like the way that I look at DSA is if there is a powerful Green Party in Maryland, DSA is a more powerful organization because they can choose whether to be in or out of the Democratic Party based on how the Greens and the Democrats are meeting their needs. And I don't think that's true for some of the more, some of the less membership-driven organizations, but I think for a DSA, I think a DSA that has a viable Green Party and a healthy Green Party and a healthy Democratic Party and maybe a healthy Udema People's Progress Party has more leverage. They have more.
No question. Yeah, 100%. Because look at how they've been so disappointed with AOC, and with very good reason. But they finally they did not endorse her in this latest cycle. But so what? She won by 2/3 of the vote, 70% of the vote, whatever she got, very high margin. The DSA had no ability to pressure her or lean on her whatsoever. As soon as she took office, she actually started incrementally, slowly, to move right. And we see that over and over again with whoever these groups manage to somehow get into power, if they do.
And I mean, look, I think some of these groups were, riding for Biden right up until the end. And then they quickly became on Team Harris. And then they were like, anybody who doesn't vote for Harris is a fool. And now they're like, we knew all along that this wasn't working.
Right.
Like, come on, y'all.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. Do you see Trump as somehow clearly, is there a difference qualitatively, in your opinion, between what Trump is likely to do and what Harris might have done?
Yeah, I think Trump is more aggressively going to reshape the government and his image than Harris would have. I think Harris was a candidate of the status quo. I think she believed things were working fine, and I think that she would have kept the bad things that are happening now happening and would have put some joy on it. I think Trump wants to remake the way that the government exists, and I think this Musk Ramaswamy stuff is really important to see in the way that he wants to remake it. And I think the problem is that when they get up there and they give their corporate Silicon Valley talking points about that are basically the private equity playbook and corporations. There are too many Democrats who are invested in that private equity playbook, who's gotten to their position of power by stripping companies of their employees, by laying a bunch of people off, by massive privatization and things like that. So I think Trump is going to do stuff like that is going to be hard, and especially for people in Maryland, where we're a blue state with a lot of federal dollars, But the problem is, the Democratic Party is no longer a party of workers who are pissed off about their layoffs. It's a party of bosses and McKinsey consultants and folks that work for those corporations that think that the private equity, layoff / program playbook is a good one. And so I think part of the reason Trump will be worse than Harris would have been is because many Democrats are on board with a lot of the worst things he wants to do, whereas the Republicans never sort of make that sort of, well, we can compromise with them approach. They have a confidence in their views that they are happy that they know they're right and they know that they can get the votes behind it. And they don't do this sort of, well, we agree the government spending is too high. We just don't agree on how high it is. The Democrats are going to do that stuff. And once they open the door to Musk and Ramaswamy, the foot's going to be on the door. Cuts are going to come no matter what.
Well, that sort of like incrementalism that the Democrats approach is, but also the way they collectively all joined in support of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, who are just two horrible, just very, very, I don't want to say bad leaders. They're bad people. They're corrupt. They're inconsiderate. They're, at least I think Jeffries, I just haven't seen any light there at all. Maybe some with Schumer, but very, very little. At least the Republicans will challenge their leadership. They don't all vote in lockstep for their House Speaker, for example, which I give them credit for that. I do. I give them some grudging credit. I'm hoping, I don't know that it will happen. I don't trust Trump at all, but I'm hoping he gets us out of this morass in Ukraine that the Democrats jumped right into. I mean, they went full bore into it. I know we don't totally agree on that. Before we we have just a few more minutes. Do you want to talk a little bit about your platform now? I hope we can get you back, Andy, soon, maybe, after the holidays, whatever, but, continue to promote you and your candidacy, because I think it's that important. But do you want to talk a little bit about your economic, your theory, which you touched on, right? You touched on it, but anything more you want to, because that seems to be a focus of yours at your website.
Yeah, so two things that I would say here. One is we're going to be doing a launch event January 4th in Annapolis. It'll be right there in the Lawyers Mall outside of Westmore's house and outside of the State House right before the session begins. So we'll be doing that launch event then, and then we're also going to be doing these town halls in every county in the state. And we're starting this weekend in Howard County. So if you're in Columbia this weekend, come on out to the library, to the Central Branch Library. We'll be just talking about what we're doing, listening to people, hearing ideas and things like that. You can find that on my Twitter or my X or whatever it's called now at GoGreen26. We got information about that there. So that's that. I would say on the economic platform, the high level thing is that we need to divest from a war economy and invest in a solidarity economy. We are going to see a major change to the way that Maryland's economy works in the Trump years and afterwards as the government starts getting slashed and those government jobs start going away. And we need to be ready to have more localized, more resilient economies. So that means things like taxing the wealthy, closing corporate tax loopholes, stop giving tax breaks to defense contractors and data centers who are destroying our communities. Start investing in local small business cooperatives, start investing in tax breaks and higher wages for working class folks, start investing in a public bank and things like that, so the people who don't have access to capital right now can get access to more democratically controlled means of capital. On our website, there's a whole section called Our Plan for a Solidarity Economy, and it has some good resources in there about some of these different planks of it and ways to start thinking about what it would look like if we had an economy that wasn't entirely dependent on war and the federal government. And Trump is going to make it so that, we have to deal with that reality sooner rather than later. But we have to think about a way that a Maryland can thrive and grow that is not entirely dependent on the tax base the federal government and the defense contractors provide to us. And I think we've laid out some really good options there and some really good alternatives in that solidarity economy section. And I definitely look forward to coming back and having more conversation about those specific things after we do our launch. I would also say things like making sure that we, I know it's not about economy, but as it comes to climate, like I'd love to come back and talk about how we build a climate policy that repairs the damage that has been done, that builds resilience within communities that are going to be facing an increasing number of crises that are related to climate and environment. And then it starts to reconstruct an economy that is able to survive the crisis that we have coming. all of that is stuff like I'd love to have another conversation sometime in the new year.
Well, you got an open invitation, Andy, and you know what? It is just before 1, so I am gonna, I'm gonna kick you out right now because I know you have to go, and I don't want to, hear that I kept you from something. So I'm going to mute you. And again, Andy, thanks so much.
Thank you, Hal. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to coming back.
All right, so that's Andy. He is out of here, and I'm back. He left the meeting. 240-242-5646 is the number, but I'm not taking any calls right now. I do appreciate it. We got a call here. Sorry, Michael, I just see you had a question there for Andy. We just let him go, but I'll forward that to him. I'm going to be back tomorrow for the free-for-all. Hopefully we'll get whatever tech issues cropped up. I got a caller. Let's see. I think that's going to be you, Michael. I'm going to take you real quick, though. Michael, yeah, thanks for calling. What's on? Is this Michael, by the way?
Yes, Michael. Yes, Hal, it's me.
Hey, how you doing? Listen, you called me, and I really try to answer every call I get, but we just lost Andy. So, quick, what's on your mind?
Yes, very quick on my mind. Yes, about moving forward into the gubernatorial and state elections. We need to focus on state and local elections and local politics for now, because we know at the federal level nothing's going to get done. And speaking about very quickly, you mentioned about reparations. I think maybe it's from like when you first started the podcast a year ago. And I just know you and I have like some areas of agreement. I think there's like one minor disagreement on reparations. So reparations need to be cash payment reparations for Black American freedmen of chattel slavery, because they built this country for 400 years and counting. Other groups that receive reparations, but Black American freedmen. And Black American freedmen voters are the ones who control not control the election, but they're the ones who determine if something's going to go through or not. Just wanted to let you know.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you for that, Michael. I'm sorry. Thank you for calling, Michael. And I will not respond to that in this moment, but if you call back on another program, tomorrow's a free-for-all, so actually that'll be a good time to do that. We can have a longer conversation about the propriety of reparations, in particular for the descendants of American slaves. I will be back tomorrow.